And we are up and running with another edition of The Miracle Within. And it is blazing hot as we move toward the mid part of summer, the dog days of summer here in the Midwest. How are you this morning, Barrett?
Oh, dog days
Ah,
are here.
yes. Get those puppies lined up and give them treats because they'll pee on your feet.
Well, and our minds are like those puppies, I think. The puppy just needs patience, it needs persistence, it needs training. And our minds are like that. We keep peeing on the floor and we, we keep having to say, no, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna point myself out to the yard and clean up this mess.
Yes. That is interesting too. I think America has probably the greatest amount of information available of any country in the world. And, we're tech heavy, tech laden. We're the leaders in all of this communication stuff. We have all of these different modalities available to us. And yet, when you really stop and look around at the general public, you come to that realization that we are the least inclined to give our mind structure and form and direction. And that, I think, is very, very telling. We've got all these raging, uh, individual identities, egos, as it were, and people are not addressing it. People are not looking at that and saying, oh, what's going on here? Am I in control, or is this in control of me?
It's true. It's true. It's the cultural equivalent of a bad habit. But rather than biting our fingernails or picking our nose, it is letting our mind wander and get attached to thoughts of fear or thoughts of bitterness, thoughts that someone else is really to blame. I think that kind of fits right in with our topic for today, which is our continuation of the Manual for Teachers. We're in section 5, subsection 2, and it's called The Shift in Perception. So I think the title really starts us off in the right direction, where we are being asked to shift our perception. So the bigger category of this is, how is healing accomplished? And when we hear the word healing, it usually evokes this idea that there's some physical problem that needs to be fixed. And I think Jesus usually talks about things in the bigger context, and I think here that's the case as well. So the healing is, how can we shift the sickness that's in our mind? How can we shift the sickness that we're attracted to by judging against other people, by feeling that they're responsible for our happiness or lack thereof?
That definitely is one of the most serious issues that we have individually, personally, is that tendency to project all of our problems onto environment or individuals in our environment. The reality, though, is that, as you had stated, the mind is what has to be healed, but in that journey, the physical manifestations are often profound, and that is, definitely part of the attraction to both the testimony of Jesus in the Bible, as well as to A Course in Miracles, is the fact that when you get to that point where you're suffering so profoundly, where your physical body is crippled or deteriorating, a lot of people will turn in that direction of, looking for the deeper cause, the fundamental reason for the physical issues. And they always stem from the mind. So that's the beauty of the Course, is that it does give us a very clear set of steps to take in order to come to an understanding as to what the problem actually is, and then to advance with securing the resolutions for that problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the very first few sentences of that section point exactly to what you're saying. It says, healing must occur in exact proportion to which the valuelessness of sickness is recognized. One need but say, there is no gain at all to me in this, and he is healed. So this is a very different way of thinking about sickness than we normally do. Like, how often do we say to ourselves, I'm valuing this sickness? That's kind of an alien concept right there. But what we're learning as we study all of these facets of the Course is that our minds are very, very, very powerful. And you could say that our collective mind is very powerful. That might be a better way to put it. And what that means is that we don't have anything occurring that is not something that we are choosing in some way. And as we realize that, then we reclaim the power to make a new choice. The last section in the text is called Choose Once Again. Choose once again, what the Son of God is. Is he this small, suffering, frail, mortal being, or is he this eternal nature of light and love? And when we put it that way, it's like, well, I think I'm going to go for the light and the love.
That generally is the most desired outcome. Although there is a certain level of intimidation in launching off in that direction, you know. As it goes on to say in the second paragraph, what is the single requisite for this shift in perception? It is simply this: the recognition that sickness is of the mind and has nothing to do with the body. What does this recognition cost? This is what's really interesting now. It costs the whole world you see, for the world will never appear again to rule the mind. For with this recognition is responsibility placed where it belongs, not with the world, but on him who looks on the world and sees it as it is not. That's interesting. So the implication here is that the world we are seeing is profoundly out of context with what the real world looks like. And are we really willing to surrender our attachment to seeing the world as damaged and banged up and filled with misery and lost hope and ultimately death? Or are we open to the idea of going through this transformation and seeing a whole different version of the world emerge into our consciousness?
Yeah, and I think this whole discussion really brings up the kind of two different levels of projection. There's the projection of the physical world of separation, which is, created or miscreated, you would say, by the thought of separation in the mind. So everything here in this world really speaks to the idea that separation is true. I'm separate from you, Chris. I'm separate from the tree I see out the window. I'm separate from the planets that are elsewhere in the solar system. Now, of course, none of that is true. But then the second layer of projection is the projection of our feelings of guilt and shame onto this physical happening. So it is true within the dream that that tree is growing outside of the window and it's over there and I'm over here. But the judgments I have about that tree, maybe I think it's growing the wrong way, or maybe I wish it would be a little different than it is. Those are projections of my perception that I'm putting onto that. So there's really two misperceptions we're dealing with. And one is the layer of thoughts we have about what's happening in the physical world. But then that deeper level of misthought is to actually believe that this world is true. And as we're continuing here, we actually are undoing both of those levels of projection and eventually coming to see that, as you were saying, Chris, that the truth is something completely different than what we perceive. The truth doesn't have beginnings or endings. It doesn't have any fear or sadness. It doesn't have any loss or loneliness. So, it all sounds pretty good, but obviously we're still attracted to it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having it as our experience.
Absolutely. We cherish it in many ways because we have created it. We are the genesis of, the world that we are surrounded by. And even though it may be hideous and horrible um, to look upon. There's still that attachment of this is my creation. But once we start to recognize that there is something better available to us, this particular part of the lesson indicates that there is an amazing and profoundly beautiful event that occurs. It says the final outcome of this lesson is the remembrance of God. What do guilt and sickness and pain and disaster and all suffering mean now? Having no purpose, they are gone. So we have remembered, or we awaken to remember, not only what God constitutes, but our participation in that process that is God unfolding as itself, and as well as unfolding as you and I. So the rewards, when you really stop and give it some room and stop and think about it, are compounded. You know, it's like you're getting compounded interest on a very infinitesimal investment, and yet you're winning the biggest lottery prize that's ever been imagined. So how spectacular is that?
It's true. It's true. We're really exchanging nothing for everything. When we see that clearly, it's an easy choice. It's only when we're confused that we can make the choice, as Jesus puts it elsewhere, between miracles and murder. You know, I mean, when you put it that way, everyone would choose miracles, but we don't see it that way. We think, well, you know, can I have it my way and be happy? I want the peace of God, and I want everyone to do exactly what I want them to do.
Yeah, that is the unfortunate inclination that our ego is always striving to attain. You know, it becomes a chess game, and we are always moving both the players on both sides of the board, motivating them and manipulating them so that we can get what we imagine to be our desired outcome. And yet all of it, when you finally look at what's left after 30 or 50 or 80 or 120 years of stumbling around on the planet, is a pile of dust, you know. And that is something that I think that keeps us coming back in over and over again, incarnating over and over again, hoping that we can leave here with something besides the pile of dust, you know, with our bounty that we have gained. Mm-hmm. But when we step back into that higher realm, there's nothing to spend money on because you already own everything. You are the inheritor of, you know, totality, the ultimate totality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as we attach to that little bit of dust, it feels like we need to. It feels like there's something that we're going to get from that. You know, this idea of being a mortal being, it doesn't really have any reality in truth, but we are very attached to it, and we feel like we need it. But there's sort of like this pain that goes along with it, and oftentimes that pain is so covered over that we don't really realize it. As I've been on my journey spiritually, there's one teacher, Rabbi, I think it's Nechman of Braslav. I might be mispronouncing that or missaying that. He was a Jewish mystic many centuries ago, and he had a saying about the silent scream. And the thing that evokes in me is this feeling that on the inside, in some way, we're all kind of screaming. We're all kind of, you know, angrily longing for happiness and for heaven, but we're also holding on to that bit of dust that we're talking about. And there's not really a compromise to be made between these things. You know, ultimately we are truth, we are perfect oneness, or we are separate and we're mortal and we're, you know, vulnerable. And I think that's one of the things that Jesus emphasizes over and over again in different ways, is that there's no middle ground between, you know, oneness and heaven. and the ego's idea of separation and division. Either wholeness is complete and perfect, or it's not. And the ego would have us believe that one is true, and the Holy Spirit knows that we're going to wake up to the truth and know that oneness is our reality. As you were saying, that the outcome of this lesson is the remembrance of God. Nice. I like that.
Yes, that's more than just exciting. That is transformative, because, again, it is reiterated over and over again that we are God in expression. So God's projection of itself into infinitude. So we can't even really conceive of our true identity as we're, attached to the ego. We're boxed off in all directions. But once we aspire to that remembering of who and what we actually are, it just is like an ongoing experience of joyful awakening. We enter into a state of ecstatic rapture that goes into infinity. So again, it's how much we are deluded by the rant and rave of our own ego about who we are, and how much we can gain by allowing ourselves to step into that truth.
Exactly. Every time we hear the ego and we say no to it, it's one more step on that stairway to heaven. That we're coming back to that realization of what we are, and there's nothing really better than that. There's nothing else that we really need to strive for. It seems like there's so many goals we have in this world, and it's not that we need to really let any of them go, but we can realize that the most important goal is coming back to that knowledge of our truth, and that when we have that, we have everything. Everything else just sort of plays itself out how it's supposed to. So I really like that idea.
Exactly, yes. And turning it over to the Holy Spirit, one of the early stages of the lessons and directs us toward that idea that we don't know what anything is or what it is for. And so if we're constantly in that state of surrendering it to the Holy Spirit and asking, what is this for? What does this signify in my life? Then all of a sudden your dreams, your desires, your aspirations take on new dimension and start going in new directions, because the Holy Spirit, or the consciousness of God, is giving you that input that makes life meaningful.
Yeah, that's perfect. It feels like a good place for us to kind of wrap it up, and just to make that announcement that we are doing an event here in Chicago, and it is coming up on September 13th. Let me just pull that up here. So the information is at Transformation, a Center for Spirit. Our workshop is called Step into the Light. That is in Alsip, Illinois, and it's Sunday, September 13th from 1 to 4 p.m. So we'd love to have you there. It's only $20. If you want to register, you can either maybe call Transformation is one of the easiest ways. Their number is 708-897-0778. So yeah, hopefully you guys will be joining us. I'd love to meet with you guys face to face and connect with you this way too. So I'm looking forward to doing this with you, Chris.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's going to be wonderful. And my expectation is to make a run up to Wisconsin next week before the event. I have some other business up there I need to do. But whenever I cross that border, I end up this time of year being magnetized to the nearest apple orchard. So there may be a bushel of apples sitting there at this event, and you, for your $20, you not only get Course in Miracles input, but you get a free apple. So you need to really mobilize and sign up and show up, and we will have a joyous experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that whole Apple thing reminds us that really everyone is a teacher and a student. So while Chris and I might be playing the role of the teacher in this event, we'll be learning from you as well, and we look forward to that. So, yeah.
Yes, it is all synergy swirling into some glorious future. So, and ultimately dropping us off in eternity. How cool is that? So, Barrett, I will chat with you in 1 week, and for everybody out there, get out and have fun and rock and roll and enjoy this Labor Day weekend.
All right. Love all you guys.
Bye.
Bye.